There is a story written by a Greek-speaking author from Syria about a ship that goes to the moon. And on the moon, the sailors encounter giant spiders and other strange life forms and get caught up in a war between the moon people and the sun people over who will colonize Venus. The Earth sailors eventually return here to their home planet and journey onward to new adventures, which the author promises will be covered in the next installment of the story, which he then never wrote. The story, which was cheekily titled A True History, was written and published about 2,200 years ago, in the 2nd century BCE. It's been reprinted and published many times since then. We can usually recognize what falls into the genre of science fiction when we encounter it in the world. Stories about space travel, about the future, about robots and aliens and technology that hasn't yet been invented. But once you start thinking about it, it is wild how many different types of stories might fit under that umbrella. How many types of settings and styles and subgenres, from horror to romance to political drama, might all be sci-fi. It can take place anywhere and anywhen, from right here on Earth to the farthest imagined expanse of the universe. How to even begin to talk about the deeper meaning or truths of such a broad category of story? Well, we'll begin today by refusing to get bogged down by definitions. So whatever it is you think about when you think about sci-fi, that's what I'm talking about. It'll be different for everyone, whether you're Star Wars or Star Trek, or maybe you don't think much of sci-fi at all, or you just absorb it tangentially from the culture around you. But let's get past the careful categorization and outlining of boundaries and just jump straight into the deep end together. Because for pretty much as far back as humans have been keeping records of the stories we tell, some of those stories have taken the form of what we would call science fiction. Sci-fi is just a genre that imagines what might lie over the next horizon, whether that horizon be physical or temporal or technological. Fans of sci-fi have been finding meaning and deeper truth within it forever. Anyone who doesn't feel a lot of resonance with this type of story, I hope that you will start to understand a little bit of what it is fans find in it. I thank you for keeping an open mind. I invite you to think of sci-fi as not necessarily a type of story you have to be into, but as a lens, or perhaps a mirror, through which we can view our own time and place. You don't need to memorize the litany against fear from Dune in order to get something out of a deeper dive into the ways that sci-fi and spirituality overlap. When we humans are presented with an unknown, a blank slate, a distant star, a mysterious land, an imagined future, an imagined alien, how we choose to fill it with our imaginations is more than just a fun daydreaming prompt. It can say a lot about us. That Greek-speaking Syrian author named Lucian was living in the Seleucid Empire between periods of conquest by Alexander the Great and the coming Roman annexation. And he imagines a ship that sails to the moon and finds warring empires there. Fantastical creatures and alien beings living out all too familiar patterns of conflict and colonization. So what do our currently popular sci-fi stories say about us and when we are? Science fiction as a storytelling form allows us to express something that more realistic stories may not. There are things about ourselves and our society that we can only see at arm's length, with a safe cushion of unreality, like giant spiders on the moon. We are able to talk about war, about fear, about the expansion of empire and what it costs. Not that every sci-fi is a thoughtful or intentional social commentary, definitely not. But we humans can't help but put a little bit of ourselves into every story we tell. And I think especially when we're trying to come up with something whole cloth. It's like a Rorschach test in story form. When we imagine an alien, a life form never before encountered, we can't help but imagine it a little bit like us, for better or worse. You know, with limbs and eyes and a head up here and feet down there, a symmetrical body plan. You know, and obviously we were prompting our alien art before. It wasn't a truly blank canvas. I'm sure with a little more time and freedom, we would have had aliens that were clouds of mist or, you know, a slime mold. We're a creative bunch, I have no doubt. But look across the genre as a whole. When a human imagines some non-human other to encounter, a robot or an alien or a monster, what fills that blank space reveals something about how we view ourselves. Sometimes the best of us, you know, wise, logical, peaceful, technologically advanced. Sometimes the worst of us, violent, unthinking, dangerous. Speculating about what we might find out there lets us express something about what we wish we could find or fear we might encounter in here. Something about what we value in ourselves and in our society, and about what we're ashamed of or anxious to avoid. Our focus in our Sunday services this month has been on the interdependent web of existence of which we are all a part. And today's message is split in two parts, so we will come back to that interdependent web and reflect on a couple of specific science fiction stories and what they might tell us about that web of connection. But for now, as we move through the other elements of the service together, I encourage you to meditate on your own favorite stories or sci-fi worlds, or just the ones you're most familiar with. What is it about them that draws you in? What is it that repels you or scares you? The familiar and the foreign, a truth that only becomes legible at a distance. What truths do these stories offer to you? Momentarily, I'm going to invite two members of our congregation, H.E. and Tab, forward to offer a reading for us. This reading comes from a story in the wider sci-fi fantasy umbrella, not strictly sci-fi, written by beloved British author Terry Pratchett in 1996. And in this scene, the Grim Reaper tries to teach his adopted granddaughter something about human nature and the power of stories. So I'll invite H.E. and Tab forward to offer a reading.
You're saying humans need fantasies to make life bearable?
No. Humans need fantasy to be human, to be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape.
Tooth fairies? Hogfathers?
Yes. As practice, you have to start out learning to believe the little lies.
So we can believe the big ones?
Yes. Justice, mercy, duty, that sort of thing.
They're not the same at all.
You think so? Then take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy. And yet you act as if there's some ideal order in the world, as if there's some rightness in the universe by which it may be judged.
Well, yes, but people have got to believe that, or what's the point?
My point exactly. There is a place where two galaxies have been colliding for 1 million years. Don't try to tell me that's right.
Well, yes, but people don't think about that. Somewhere there was a bed.
Correct. Stars explode, worlds collide. There's hardly anything in the universe where humans can live without being frozen or fried. And yet you believe that a bed is a normal thing? It's the most amazing talent.
Talent?
Oh, yes. Very special kind of ignorance. You think the whole universe is inside your heads.
You make us sound mad. A nice, warm bed.
You need to believe in things that aren't true. How else can they become?
There is a short story by Ray Bradbury written in 1950, called There Will Come Soft Rains. In the story, a fully automated smart home in Allendale, California stands empty with its mechanical systems all busily whirring away, vacuuming empty rooms, heating up meals that go cold and eventually rot, turning the lights on and off, announcing the date and the weather, playing the homeowner's favorite music. But the humans and all of humanity, it seems, have perished in some disaster. Eventually, a lightning storm catches the house on fire and it burns down. The flames climbing while the sound system in the library reads one of the humans' favorite poems, There Will Come Soft Rains by Sarah Teasdale, a poem about nature's complete indifference to the demise of humanity. Bradbury's final line in the short story reads, Dawn showed faintly in the east. Among the ruins, one wall stood alone. Within the wall, a last voice said over and over again and again, even as the sun rose to shine upon the heaped rubble and steam, today is August 5th, 2026. Today is August 5th, 2026. When it was written, this was a story about the future. With fantastical technology, smart homes, can you imagine? Distant imagined disasters, but now it is a story about August 5th of this year. There is a kind of historical vertigo that happens when you read science fiction from the far past and see how the future actually played out. As UUs, we strive to respect and promote the interdependent web of life. We affirm that we are part of that web, but what does that mean? Which part are we? We are all of us shaped by a society that loves to place things in hierarchies. So the idea of a truly flat, truly mutually interdependent universe can feel a bit beyond us. I think it's something that science fiction has proved itself uniquely suited to grapple with. So many stories in this genre are about exploring our hopes and our fears about our place in this hierarchy or that. How do we fit in all the vast connecting threads of the cosmos? Where do we find ourselves, humans? The sci-fi classic War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells was published in 1898 and tells the story of powerful alien ships invading Great Britain, causing civilians to flee their homes and become displaced refugees in their own country. The aliens are in possession of intellects vast and cool and unsympathetic, as well as weapons and technology far beyond the capabilities of Earth. So in Victorian England, the heart of the British Empire at the turn of the century, Wells dared to ask, what if we aren't at the top of the hierarchy? What if someone did to us what we have been doing to the other peoples of the world? Invaded and displaced us and deployed weapons we can't defend against. And suddenly the terror and inhumanity of imperialism becomes legible to a British audience. Only at a safe fictional arm's length does self-reflection become somewhat more possible. There's still a thriving thread within sci-fi today that could be described as, what if humans aren't on top? What if something were smarter than us, stronger than us? What if something hunted us for food or farmed us for resources? If we aren't the top of a hierarchy, then what are we? It speaks to a deep kind of anxiety that makes for, honestly, delicious stories. You know, I love, these are like the Alien and Predator movies, The Matrix to some extent, The Thing, a lot of great thrillers, scary stories. It taps into some deep prey animal instinct that we have in us. At its best, that type of story can be a call to humility, to empathy, an invitation to imagine yourself into the perspective of a different part of the web of life. A reminder that the feeling of being at the top is an illusion, and that anyone, any being, any species might find themselves the smaller, weaker, more vulnerable one in the future. But in Bradbury's There Will Come Soft Rains, we see an entirely different expression of anxiety, not the fear that something bigger and stronger might come along, but the fear that we humans are entirely unnecessary. That we, in the end, are solely destructive to the web of life, and that humanity is not really a part of nature at all. A version of the future where we all disappear and no one even notices, not even the machines that we built. This, too, is written into the foundations of a lot of sci-fi. Dystopian fiction about human destructiveness and stories where, the real monsters are the people, the real Walking Dead are the survivors. And it finds its way into our contemporary world as well. If you remember early COVID days when pollution levels dropped and people were saying things like, maybe humanity is the real virus. It's a view of our species that springs from a kind of hopelessness, a paralyzing shame, a deep, unspoken belief in our collective irredeemability. And it shows up even among UUs who insist that we believe in the redeemability and worthiness of all. Because the truth is, the belief can bring a type of comfort as well. The idea that if we fail utterly as a species, the world will still be okay. I think that when it feels easier to imagine happy futures only by deleting us from them, there's a deep sadness being expressed. And science fiction stories are one way we can touch that feeling, the fear and the comfort of it, hold it in our hand and get a good look at it and at ourselves. Project Hail Mary, a book published in 2021, which now has a movie adaptation in theaters, is sometimes touted as an example of an up-and-coming hope-core subgenre in science fiction. I'll do my best not to spoil anything that isn't in the trailers, but in this story, all life on Earth faces an existential threat, and humanity has to come together to send one last-ditch mission to the farthest reaches of space with very slim chances for success and no chance of return for the astronauts. And upon arriving at their destination, the crew encounters an alien astronaut sent from his own planet, trying to solve the same problem threatening his homeworld. It's a story about problem solving and risk and interspecies friendship. It's not without conflict, not without loss, even death, but it is ultimately a hopeful story about people's ability to do hard things for the sake of one another. A story about humans being needed, having a role to play in saving our world and others. This is an emerging movement in sci-fi that takes some of that anxiety about our place in the web of existence and adds a very deliberate dollop of hope, trying to offer up a different reflection of the face of humanity. These are the solar punk stories, the Afrofuturist and indigenous sci-fi writers insisting that there is a place for humanity in the cosmos, that we are siblings to all other beings, but that our current way of doing things probably won't allow us to find that place. Stories about a peaceful and thriving imagined future, but only on the other side of some transformational shift in priorities. In Project Hail Mary, it's the title project itself. The ability of the world's people and governments to put aside conflicts and pour all their resources and trust into a long-shot science mission. And that element can feel more like fantasy than encountering alien life forms. And that's exactly what I'm saying. That imaginative leap is part of what sci-fi helps us to do. These new stories ask us what might lie over the horizon and answer not with grim gray warnings, but with defiant full-color possibility. What would we like to find over the horizon? Because whatever it is, we had better start building it now. Do we want post-scarcity Star Trek universe where food is endlessly replicated and money doesn't exist? Do we want communities of mutual care and interspecies reciprocity? We don't need to wait for first contact. We have other species right here. Do we want to be able to solve our planet-threatening problems? Do we want a rewilded planet filled with wandering tea monks making friends with wild-built robots? If we can't imagine it, how will we ever get there? If we can't tell ourselves stories about impossible things, believe in things that aren't currently true, how will they become possible? How will we become? 2,200 years ago, a man in Syria wrote down a story about a ship sailing to the moon. He almost certainly did not think anything like that would ever come to pass in reality. He was just making up a story that reflected his own time and place and imagination. And because he was a person and we are people, his story also reflected our future faces back to him. Just a few weeks ago, we all watched the Greek-named ship, the Artemis II, circle the moon, sailing so far they went out of contact with the Earth for 6 minutes, farther away than from this planet than any human before them. Each horizon crossed opens up a new one ahead of us all. It's up to us to fill it with imagined futures. So we can talk about the futures we fear and hold on to the futures that we dream of. Becky Chambers, a popular author in the solar punk genre, wrote in her book, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, that the universe is what we make of it. And it's up to you to decide what part you will play. If sci-fi is a genre that asks the question, what's over the next horizon, we already know at least part of the answer. We are. Wherever we go next, there will be, in one form or another. And what that means, whether that's something to be feared or hoped for or wondered at, is still up to us, is up to all of us. So let's tell that story together.